Welcome to the explanation of Blue Ocean Strategy. You may have read the book. This would be a good review if you have. If you have not read the book, that is okay as well. During our session or your session with a consultant, you will be able to ask questions and be directed to certain pages within the book that may be relevant in actually reading. It is a very good read if you want to go a little bit deeper and really understand the research behind the Blue Ocean Strategy. And it's one of many competitive strategies that can be taken as you venture into either building your company or growing your company. So today we're going to first start off with imagining yourself in this peaceful, floating, bright blue ocean with sapphire skies. That's how we all wish our business was currently running. Or I'm hoping that it is running this way, especially if you're following your purpose. Now, with Blue Ocean Strategy in the book, this strategy was created by Chan Kim and Renee Mogborn. Sorry if I completely ruined that name. And was introduced into the world in 2005. And it was very progressive when it was introduced. It still is very progressive now because of the innovative nature of the book. And the reason why they wrote this book was because they looked at the competitive strategies or competitive advantages that were already in the industry and how these larger corporations, for the most part, struggled to be able to differentiate themselves in the market. And typically, and you may have already seen this in the element scorecards you've received or tools and strategic options you've received from our program or have been defined by one of your lead agents, that typically the most defined strategy is Porter's competitive strategy. And even Porter has upgraded since then, where he is now speaking of dual value in his strategy, which is very good for impact type founders. But originally he had, and it has been known as a kind of one defined type of strategy you can take. And it's either the high price, where customers pay premium costs at a low volume, but high value. And then the second traditional strategy is a low price with a high volume, but a low value in the end. And what this does, and that's a traditional way to depict what type of strategy you're taking. And the reason why you want to know your strategy, even in the Blue Ocean part of it, is because it defines a lot of additional items that you're going to be looking at, mainly cost, startup cost, or startup costs of a new program or service or product that you're going to be doing. That is one reason why you really need to know which path or which strategy you're going to start traveling on. And then also you're going to add in, how much human capital do you need, or employees is an easier way to think of that. And how much technical support do you need, and what does that look like? All those are after effects of this first part of your strategy, which is defining this. So Blue Ocean strategy is different in that it's a creation of value so different that you essentially make the competition irrelevant. And of course, everyone wants the competition to be irrelevant. So in previously, when technology and things like that weren't really there, this would kind of be equal to inventing something new like the light bulb. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not other people that are building the same thing or have built it. Just like if you were creating a new a way to say uh, the light bulb. Let's go back to that. Um, there's always going to be someone out there that's doing it too. It's a small world, and we think very similarly. So I would remove that. And it also doesn't necessarily remove all competition either. People will have similar things that are kind of one-offs of what you're doing. But essentially, this strategy or what we're going to be doing is finding these blue oceans. And your blue ocean may not have a unicorn or pretty horse in the background. That has no relation to it, but that's what we're looking for. So right now there are two types of oceans. The red oceans are where the traditional market is hanging out in. That's where the competitive nature comes, clashing with each other. Where you have AT&T against Verizon, and they're just head to head. These are those red oceans where it just gets bloody because everyone is just competing with each other in these existing markets to beat out the competition. Maybe just like this tiny percentages of movements. And they're all trying to exploit this existing demand. So you have a demand for cellular service, and you have these competitors that are going against a service. Recently I wanted to switch my carriers because my cell service carrier because my bill is just getting too expensive. So I had all the main carriers sitting in front of me, and they all look like the same carrier. You could have probably just put a new thing on there, and they literally were competing and making value. So make the value cost trade-off. They were making that with just these small things. Like one was offering unlimited Netflix and one was offering HBO. And it was just these small one-offs to create that extra value based on this existing demand. And then they align the whole system of a firm's activities with its, strategic choice and differentiation, which is where they're trying to get this high value or a low cost from it. And cell carriers are a great thing where they're competing on you get unlimited Netflix or you get unlimited HBO, and they're these differentiations to make their product seem like a higher value. Or with them, they're actually making their products, because they're low cost, both of them are the lowest cost you can get. They're trying to showcase, oh, we have this extra value, but you're still paying the same price is what they're doing. And that's that differentiation. And to be honest, as a consumer in this existing market of telecommunications, I want to stay with the one I watch the most, which is Netflix. So they get you because it's still low cost. They get you on that differentiation, and that's a normal market that you're going to see. And many even of new startups that are coming in are competing at this toe-to-toe level, and your company will eventually go into this once everyone figures out the greatness that you're trying to create. You will start competing in red oceans, and later on in the slide you'll be able to see that. So with blue oceans are creating innovation. So it's this innovation mentality, and you're creating a new value curve. So when we talk about value curve, we're talking about a chart, and you would have this link in your email or your dashboard with the link to your blank blue ocean chart. So when we talk about value curve, we're talking about a graph and the line that showcases where your value is. And when you define it individually, this would be, just an individual value curve. And you're seeing here, up the curve goes up, and that's where your customer is going to get that value. And then when we go through it, you're going to see how that defines into what that value is. But this curve right here is what we're looking for. And you'll have that, and this is what we're going to be completing, or you're going to be completing within the platform and discussing and working with your lead agent on. So let's go back to the slide. So blue oceans are creating that curve. So you're creating an uncontested market space. So that's where there's, little beautiful fish that aren't trying to kill each other over here in your blue ocean. And they're not creating all that blood on the left side from the sharks that are attacking each other, which sharks don't really attack each other, but they could. And then you're making the competition irrelevant because it's in this body of water. That doesn't mean it eventually won't have competition. But as you start or develop a new product or service, that's one less thing you don't have to want to worry about all the time is your competition. And then it does create and capture new demand. So when we talk about existing demand versus new demand, there's already demand for self-service. So it's in there. Just like banking, there's already a demand for banks and transferring money, but there is a new demand that's being created for Bitcoin, which is, transferring currency or money without banks. So that's that new type of demand where you have people that haven't even been touched yet for that demand. And then break the value cost trade-off. So the value cost trade-off is when we were talking about the high price, high value, low volume. So those are the trade-off. And sometimes you can see this in quadrants on a chart where you're fitting in one of the quadrants, because you can't, it doesn't fit within these lines that have already been set up. So, for example, you could have a high value, low cost, which is a lot of, the technology and cloud platform and Amazon. They were able to create a high value item that traditionally was high cost to make, which would have required this high price. But because they were able to make it at a low cost, they were then able to charge they were able to do a low price, which then got a high volume. So sorry, that does get a little bit technical if you're new to strategy, but the biggest thing to understand is it just doesn't fit in these normal constraints or equations that define strategy in the market. And then the last point is align the whole system of a firm's activities in pursuit of differentiation and low cost. So this is the same. It's just this, these points above. So you're still getting at the same item is minus the fact that you're on the pursuit, which is innovation. So I'm going to have you pause this recording for a moment and click on the second video link that you have in here, which goes to the HBR website. And this is the website you're going to go to and spend 2.25 minutes listening to the intro of Circus du Soleil, the circus, and be able to get an explainer from the prestigious Harvard Business Review. So take a moment to pause now. Okay, so going back in, you've been able to review the video, and they've talked about a few points. And these items are going to be part of your discovery process within your Canvas. So the strategies to be able to discover what your business's blue ocean strategy is are these three items. Your strategy canvas, which the strategy canvas will also create your competitive canvas, which is just defining your competition or the competition in the industry. Because remember, we're trying to get outside of that competition. So the first step is to define your competition in the industry. And you've done this in your value and selling module 3 already. So you already have those defined items. Now you're taking it a level deeper and saying, okay, what are the pinpoints of the competition that I normally would be competing with? So for the telecommunications example, you're going to have your main competitors, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, on your competitive map, and then they compete, we already know, on cell coverage, so their coverage area and the quality of their cell service. So those are two main competitive items that all of them are having to compete on, and they're kind of like check marks that, I mean, they do somewhat have to have, but the size of their coverage is one that they compete on, and some of them use that as a trade-off as well. So that is the step right before the strategy canvas, and we're going to be able to build that on this first page, which is right here. So if you have any ideas or you've already done the module 3, I would put on the top row your competitors. And you're really wanting to do local competitors based on your stage, and then big powerhouse competitors that are national or international. So you're going to get a really good view of what that competitive landscape looks like. And then, so put your ideas down and we'll go deeper into that. And then on the red ocean value side, you can already list out things that you know. So when I was saying telecommunication, well, they compete automatically on the quality of their coverage. So that would go on here on all the main points that they're already competing on. And you're just going to want to make a list, as many as you can think of. And then again, we'll brainstorm together to verify that that you've made sure you have all of those items. So that's the strategy canvas. And then to go even further, when we talk about we're going to discover it further, we're going to go through the 4-action framework. And the 4-action framework is on this side, and it's really just answering these important questions. So again, you can go and take a shot at answering them if you want to beforehand, to get yourself thinking, and then we will come together and really put our heads together and find the best answer. But you'll see here where there's just 4 main questions and an example and what they look like in moving forward. So you are more than welcome to take a shot at it, but again, you don't have to, because we're going to go through it together if you feel uncomfortable actually going through and answering these questions. And then another way to be able to go through and find out what your blue ocean strategy would be is to go through the focus, divergence, and compelling tagline options. And that is, we have this down here, which you just kind of play with what you're doing. And you also have this 6-path framework to work off of as well, which is answering a lot of the same questions. But once all of these questions are answered, you've laid out your red ocean, then we can actually go in and find the holes and find the blue ocean part of it, which makes these 3 complementary qualities a little bit easier to value. So on the next slide, this again goes into more of that strategy canvas. So a strategy canvas is essentially a graph showing what your industry currently competes on. So we just talked about that, and where you are located on that graph. So that's defining where you're at or where you want to be. Your business line on the graph is known as your value curve. So that, when we were talking about value selling, well, what is your value curve in the market? Where does that lie? If your value curve is 100% aligned with your competition on the graph, this means that you're really in a competitive market and you have no differentiation. So the first step is to get something different. So your goal is to have a value curve different enough from your traditional competitors that you are not competing with them anymore. And the first step is to at least have one differentiation so that you can emphasize that. But then we go in and we look at some untapped demand. And then that goes into your Circus de Soleil example and where they have hit their value. And this is their value curve that goes along with the video. So you can see where the strategy, when you look at the strategy canvas, you have at the bottom all the items that are currently competitive in the market, beyond the create. So on the right side, that's your create stage where you have pure innovation. So they've taken all of their work that they've done and the frameworks they've done, and then there's this new creation over here that we're going to work on. But first, they're aligning what the traditional curve looks like. And you can see, traditionally where they're competing in, and then the red lines are where, they're showing Ringling Brothers. That's where they're competing, and other ones are competing. And literally, if you want to take a good look at it, a lot of them are just going and doing the opposite. I always say that innovation is just the opposite of what everybody else is doing, and that really is the truth. And when we look at the competing market, we're going to see what things we can do the opposite. Now, there are some limitations where you just can't do the opposite because cost, it hasn't been created yet. Like, there's just limitations, which you can see over here, where the curve is the same under price. Well, price though is the opposite, but the fun and humor and the thrills and danger, like those are so core to what the so core to what the end value is for the client. Like it just cannot be changed that much, or you know, you're not going to have anyone to be able to go to your stuff. So you'll see that there are going to be some categories that you just can't do, but you're going to want to have a variety. And then you'll have one that's like the item that you can raise. And then, of course, the create is based on the work that's being done. So you're going to see, and we're going to be able to do this with your specific market as well. And you will notice on that previous slide, again, that you'll have the eliminate, raise, and reduce, raise, and create. We're going to be able to do that once we go through the 4 actions framework, and be able to discover that new value curve for yourself. So the 4 action framework, we have it listed in questions, but it can be set up like this. In a quadrant type setup, but I think it doesn't really matter. I mean, we can do that, but you'll be able to see that. Now, the focus, divergence, and compelling tagline. Again, this is something that we're going to do last after we've done the entire review of the questions. So these 3 categories are the initial litmus test of the commercial viability of your new value curve. So you've created your value curve, you found out what that is, and then you'll go through this litmus test within these 3 categories. And this kind of looks like the brand identity matrix, which gives you a sense of where you're at now and where your strategy is going now before the innovation. And then this will just be that second step to really confirm that you have it, honed in. So the focus, this is saying, does it have focus? So in your brand identity matrix, you have 2 categories on the side that are your focus areas. These are your strengths already. Now, it's not like, some some systems where you're supposed to work on your weaknesses. That's not true in business. Your weaknesses are what you need to outsource or get rid of. It costs too much to fix weaknesses, and in personal self exploration, it's the same thing. Don't even bother. No, you know that they're there, but you can't fix them. Now, you could fix weaknesses of a market, so somebody else externally, but you can't fix your own weaknesses in that sense. So it's better to find and work on your strengths. So this is what we mean by focus. Does your company have a focus? So in restating, this means not diffusing your efforts across all key factors of competition. So that's the other reason why you have a focus, because you can't spread yourself thin in your organization. It's best to have these high-end focus areas and really, really focus on them, because you can't be good at everything. Your company can't do everything, and you personally can't do everything. So it aligns with all those. And then the divergence, does it look across alternative rather than focusing on competition? So that's when we diverge from the norm, or what I say, you just do the opposite. If you have kids, you just, they do the opposite of what you tell them. So you have to, tell them, to use a little bit of psychology to get them to do things. So this is asking that question. Does it actually look across alternatives rather than focusing on competition? So we look first at a lot of competition to find out, where something's at. But are you looking at alternative paths or alternative industries? That's what that's saying. So when you look at the Circus du Soleil, an alternative choice is to go to the theater. Now, it's not, so it's kind of like looking at your indirect competition. So you're going to have indirect competition, where they get the end value, so they get the fun and they get the outing, but it's not direct competition to the Circus. So that's where you're saying, are we looking at alternatives or these indirect items? You also can look at indirect competition a lot. It can sometimes be the before and after in your supply chain. And the supply chain really is just the life cycle of someone going through a process. So if you have a mortgage broker and a real estate broker, your indirect competition can be, or looking across alternatives would be looking at that mortgage broker as a path or a path of divergence that you can take. And then compelling tagline. Does it have a tagline that makes its strategic profile clear? We've talked about this tons. Your tagline, along with your name, has to be very direct in what you're doing. Just, we sell cheap stuff. If that's what your focus is, if that's what your divergence is in the market, that's a clear tagline. And being very into that. That also could be like those 3 core words, something that it tells exactly what you're doing. So in the next slide, Southwest is another really good example of a blue ocean strategy. Southwest is a good example recently too, because it's starting to get competitors, but it's been on its own for quite some time, and now it's just getting competitors with Virgin Air and Frontier. But before, it took them a while to get to that point, and they're not having the margins, profit margins that they would have seen. So when we use Southwest Airlines as an example, the company focuses on 3 factors: friendly service, speed, and frequent point-to-point departures. This way it can turn alternative customers, those who would rather drive, into customers. So when we look at diverging markets, so their divergence is drivers, like cars, driving cars. That's their point of divergence that they're starting to go into as well, because their prices are low enough to compare to driving to that location. So Southwest airline strategy canvas looks very different from other airlines, especially when it first started. So I was just talking about that. It has formed its strategy with a great awareness and acumen rather than reactively in an attempt to keep up with competition. So airlines had been competing head to head for some time, trying to make differentiation with a fluffier chair or more leg room or carry-ons or anything like that. When the main strategy of Southwest was that they decided that they were going to compete with their indirect partners, which is, travelers driving. So you can even say car rentals. So they're trying to price match to car rentals versus price matching to other carriers. And then a compelling tagline: the speed of a plane at the price of a car. So it literally is telling you that they are competing with cars, and they're looking at the people that are using cars to travel. So whenever you need it, it's strong, authentic, and it advertises truthfully exactly what they're doing. So we're going to want to come up with that. And that's a really, really great example. So I've gone through a long route of what the Blue Ocean strategy looks like and how we're going to try to define it. Now, as you're thinking about Blue Ocean strategy, you still have a choice to actually go that route. So again, Blue Ocean strategy has a longer time frame to get it to market. So if you're wanting an outcome on a business that's getting really high returns or really or large amounts of traction, before 18 months, a blue ocean strategy isn't for you. Also, if you're not, and this can depend, because it can cost more to get to this point. So what I mean by that, if you're not willing to be patient and take the time that it takes, the alternative is that you're going to pay a lot for marketing upfront. Like, it's going to cost a lot to market because it's a new understanding, a new way of doing things, and that costs money. So that is the alternative. So if you don't have funds or don't want to spend funds on it, blue ocean wouldn't be for you. So I want you to understand those two items and be very aware if you want to do that route. Now, how it relates to impact and creating the change you wish to see in the world and solving a large problem in the world. You can already see the pinpoints of going into new markets. So these are people that normally don't get attention. And it can be, as easy as, the people that drive instead of fly. That is a new market. But we're looking at the people that are underserved and marginalized. And those are markets, and we've seen this conversation in international development, that they're the people that live on less than $2 a day, and I think that it's up to $4 a day. Those are these markets where you have to innovate. You have to find the blue ocean strategy, because there's not a way to do it. There's not a way to do the traditional strategy in those cases, because it doesn't fit in these two categories. It just doesn't fit. You can't create a high value light, solar light. So it's a really good one that's popular right now, is creating these very cheaply made but high quality, high value lights that aren't going to break in a month or after using it once. That's creating a high value because they're not going to break. They're very good quality. But it's very hard to make those at a low cost so that you can sell them at a low price to a large volume. So that's where that innovation and the importance of blue ocean strategy comes into play when you're trying to solve or change the world. And that's what we're going to be looking for when we develop your program. So you want to make that decision, or you're going to have to make that decision on, are you willing to be patient to create the change you wish to see in the world? Are you willing to be patient to create a blue ocean, which is more than 18 months? And if we haven't already talked about it, this is kind of that point where I'm saying, yes, you have to decide or not. And then if you're not willing to be patient, which you may not, because there's some issues that you want solved right away, are you willing to either spend the capital that you may have available or find capital to be able to do that? Because it's going to have, a higher cost to initially create it and market it. So those are the understandings when going out blue ocean. Now, you can still create wonderful, beautiful things without it. And working with Savenco, we're trying to create the greatest strategy so that we can reduce costs, we can reduce time to market, all that. Like, we're going to try to find we're looking to find the perfect mix so that you can do it the most efficient way. So know that we're on your side for that. But in general, you want to make those decisions if you haven't already, and just be aware of them. Be aware that that is normal. trajectory for a blue ocean strategy. And there is still a lovely place if you want to compete. There is abundance. If you're in, if you're, we're talking about having abundancy and things. There is that in the competitive market still. I mean, you still can have a piece of that pie, and live an abundant life, without creating change, with still giving and being of service. You can still do that, and if that's the route you want to take, then we can still help you take that route as well. Because no matter what, you can still serve and impact others, and we're going to be there to help you. But this is that defining moment if you want to go to this blue ocean strategy, or if you want to, um, be in that competitive market, and we can help you, um, be the killer whale or the dolphin. Dolphin's a really good one that's going to compete with those sharks, and dolphins compete by, being really, really dang smart. And we can help in that too. But we want you to make that definition and define that, for us. And when we talk next, that's going to be the first question that we have. And then we'll ask that question again after doing your, blue ocean brainstorming, if that's still what you want. And then we're going to go with your answer. So we hope you enjoy this full synopsis of the blue ocean strategy. If you're interested, I recommend reading the book, but you don't need to read it before we meet. And then jot down any notes in your, strategy canvas. The more notes, the merrier. We will see you next time. Have a good night or day.